Right, thank you. Jona Potkivanot. I actually lived in this great city as a student in the early 90s, which was a great time. And every time I get back, I really enjoy being here, especially with so many colleagues. So thank you for having me. In the next 20 minutes, I will talk to you about transforming a museum into a multi-platform storyteller. Not so much going into the platform, but into the organizational and strategic context that you need in order to be successful. And then go like this. Yeah. Thank you. Basically, let me see, I need to go to this one. The National Institute for Sound and Vision is the media museum and a media archive of the Netherlands. We are in this fancy building just outside of Amsterdam. And what you see on your right, downstairs we have about 6 floors of objects, about 20,000 of them related to radio and television history. Upstairs we have the museum, and we have about 1.5 million hours of media coverage, and that has nearly all been digitized. Now keep that in mind, because it's very important to have digitalized content if you want to be a multi-platform storyteller. Basically, in the museum we were doing fine. Stakeholders were happy, visitor numbers were stable, we had a lot of enthusiastic reactions from the public, so why change? Now that has to do with concerns about the long-term relevance of your museum. What are you about? What is your role in society? What do you want to talk about, and why is that relevant to everybody else? Like I said, this is what we used to do, the old museum. One of the main challenges that we were facing was that media was evolving fast. It is not about radio and television, it's about becoming much broader. Now, what is your relevance as a museum, a family-oriented museum, is the younger half of the family doesn't watch TV anymore. What is your relevance to the media network, the professionals, if you talk about what they used to do instead of what they are going to do? So that is something that we want to have, and our stakeholders were also voicing growing concerns about this changing world of media. You have to think about filter bubbles, fake news, data and privacy issues. Now all these things we wanted to talk about, but our stakeholders, like schools and the government, also asked us to join in that conversation. And that is very, very important, because I think museums are a place for reflection, for discussion, for having experiments with new technologies in a very safe environment. And especially since the media is under fire and has a credibility issue, they really wanted us as a media museum to play a critical part in that conversation. Now that is not a theoretical concept. In all the years of our existence, we never had to close for security reasons. In the last 2 years, 3 times the museum and the media park where we were at were closed due to protest or direct threats against us or other media people. So it's really something that you need to address. Also, museums are very much about preserving cultural heritage. All the radio and television content is automatically generated and archived, but everything on social media is not. And the cloud is not an archive. Now, most of the links and the popular videos that you have go dead after a year or 2 years, and then it's gone. You cannot find it anymore. So we thought as our task also to play a role there. And finally, in customer engagement, we really had a critical question whether all these exhibits were the way forward. Of course, they were appreciated, and they always said, yeah, that attracts the people to the museum. But if we really looked at our data, over time, consistently 91% of people who attended the museum did not know there was an exhibition. And I was head of marketing at that time, so, so what about that job? But despite all the marketing efforts, many people didn't even know. 5% said we are going to the museum where something is going on, but that doesn't have to be an exhibition, it can also be programming or an event. And only 4% said, yes, we are coming to you especially for that exhibition. Now meanwhile, we were spending a few €100,000 a year to go from exhibition to exhibition to exhibition. But if you want to be part of the media conversation, you have to be where that media conversation takes place, which is on the mobile phone, which is on events and so on. So basically we took a step back, and about 5-6 years ago we said we're going to be in a different direction. We repositioned ourselves. Our mission statement went from preserving and presenting the story of radio and television to strengthening your life in media. And in media means media is all around us, like fish in the water. So we want to show the positive side of media, how big it can make your world, how easy it is to connect, what a wealth of information there is, but also address the negative effects that I talked about. We wanted to have responsible use of media and play a role in that. Basically, our job in society is to make Holland media literate. That is what we are after. Now, that has huge consequences because you have to change a lot. First, the old museum was no longer valid, and we're building a new one. I'll show you a bit later. Also, collection-wise, we don't have to. You have to have the content in order to tell the whole story. So we started to archive and collect also podcast, web video, YouTube, and so on. Partnering-wise, we were also always working with the national broadcasters, but now we had to expand and talk to Google and Facebook and YouTube. There's all the challenges that presents. But if you want to talk about the story of media, you have to include the people who create that media. And finally, we said we go multi-platform. We want to be there where the conversation about media is taking place, and that is not necessarily just the museum. So what does that mean? We made a story which was all about a strategy which is all about going on site, online, and on location. Be there where the conversation takes place. Now, we're building a brand new museum, as I said. There's 5 worlds of media that you can explore, and we're using a lot of digital technology to create that experience. For example, we have one floor which is a project space, which we don't fill ourselves, but our partners bring in their new technology and projects that were just presented to have the visitor experience these kind of technologies firsthand. The blue screen you see there is like a visualization of all the radio waves that you have around you, and you can move yourself like one of these old tuning dials from the radio, and you pick up the police radio, your favorite radio station, satellite communication, these kind of things. We have a deep fake station which is going to be there where people can actually experience what deep fake is by themselves. And of course, finally, you can make the Prime Minister say whatever you want for the first time. But that was not enough. We also looked at how can we approach certain communities that will not come to the museum naturally. Now, for example, with a cyclist, we had Radio Tour de France, which had broadcast from our building for 1 week. The first time we did that, 600 bicycle people showed up, and we marketed it with the bicycle communities, all the clubs and so on. Now, the second time there were 3,000. Last time before COVID, we had 6,500 people showing up just because they like cycling and being part of Radio Tour de France. Now, you can have programming around that. You can get them at their internet, their website, their email, so to say. And once they're there, you start engaging them in your online community. First by sending them only content which is related to sport, but then expanding that to the broader story. And of course, we use that to do actions and marketing for museum visits as well. There's also the case for on location. Schools come to us, but we go to schools with media literacy programs. We are in the classroom. Also, the media conversation takes place in the libraries, which is a great place because everybody gets there. And the programming that we do in our museum, we now duplicate in libraries in order to have a far greater reach and have great exposure. One of our main challenges, if we want to increase media literacy in Holland, is to reach the groups that usually do not come to museums, like especially the lower economic strata. There's a barrier. I mean, even coming in this building, it's very impressive, but I was like making a bow and humbly enter this temple of culture. Well, if you're working class or people of color and completely not in in your environment to do stuff like this, you have to create different content, but also a different form to engage these people. Therefore, we created the Dutch Media Week, which is a festival, and it's really low entry barriers. You get around, you get a tour, and you meet famous people. And you can see the studios and so on. And there's a lot of programming in our museum as well. And that attracted, at the first time, there were 5,000 people. And then you create a community and they started sharing that on their social media. So the second time, we had 21,000 people. And the last time we did it before COVID, 50,000 people turned up in 1 week to have experience with all kinds of media. And we used all the stuff that we had, also the new technologies and then deepfake and so on, to engage them with the media in a festival kind of way. Now, of course, we have also, you have to subscribe, so we have their email addresses, and again, you engage them online 3 or 4 times, very specifically based on their interest, before you convert them into coming to the museum. Online is a very important aspect of that, and like I said, basically we want to have 3 to 4 contacts with our audience each year. 1 physical visit to a museum or another event, and a couple of online things. Now, time-wise, I will not go into these platforms, but we have collection channels that we especially use social media for. And for example, when it's Brexit, we show movies about Churchill speaking about Europe. And we had an online video production on the media coverage of pandemics over the last 100 years, including now. Tilt is something that I want to share. That is an online media magazine used for millennials. That you can show it on their mobile, and it's a really quick storytelling thing where you can interact, and it has surveys and stuff like that. And it was very specifically made for millennials that we don't see in our museum. And now we have over 100,000 subscribers, and you can engage with them in this media conversation. Now, organizationally, this is difficult to do. The first thing you need to do if you have a multi-platform story is break the volume paradigm, which I mean, if your museum is about getting as much as people on the museum floor as possible, then this is not the way to go. If you're about telling a story and making a contribution to society and having the content and the platforms in order to reach the public on their own space, then this is definitely something you want to do. The second is to accelerate. As museums, we tend to be quite slow, but if you are an online producer, social content has to go day by day, week by week. You have to do video production on a monthly basis. You have to produce these stories for Tilt and other production at least on a quarterly basis. So you really have to accelerate. Now, one thing that helps is to hire a nerd. So don't start with platform strategies and content strategies and so on. You have one issue: nerds don't like to work in museums because we think we're slow and old-fashioned and so on. So I found my nerd at a student exhibition where he had plugged himself in such a clever way doing his electronic dance music that he landed a gig in Japan. So I said, well, come to us, maybe you can do it on a larger scale without changing the content or the platforms. He quadrupled our reach in half a year's time. He knows other people, so then you really get the people on board that can do this. Now, the risk of stepping on some toes here, curators versus editorial boards. Who do you put in charge of the content that you talk about? And curators are very, very valuable also in our museum because they are the ones that know the collection and so on. But if you give them the floor on what you want to talk about, they're going to talk about their hobbies on the museum floor. So we said, you're going to be advisors to the editorial board. They are very well connected outside. We want to know from the editorial board, what is the national conversation about and how can we contribute? And that's what determines our content. Now, invest in facilities. You don't want to sound and look like you're in the bathroom with all your video productions. So you have to invest in some cameras, some people who can edit, some sound equipment, because you have a spoiled audience online. And just giving what you have to the marketing department and say do something on social will not build you an online community. This costs money, especially in the first stage, and that is something that you have to need to take care of. So you have to stop something, like exhibitions in our case, in order to finance another thing. Once you have an elaborate online community, you can really use that to convert that into museum things, museum visits, and also the events you can sell a lot of tickets. So business-wise, that is something that you should take into account. But be prepared to invest in something that will cost money for the first 2 or 3 years. Now, that brings me to the conclusion of this presentation. I hope I have given you some thoughts and ideas on how a multi-platform story can work. It can bring a lot in terms of reach, in terms of relevance, who you are, in terms of reaching audiences that you don't usually meet on the museum floor. But you have to embed it very carefully in your strategy and have to make changes in your organization in order to not make this a one-off thing, but a continuous part of how you convey your story to your audience. Now, that gives me exactly 15 seconds to say thank you. Thank you also to the translators who are doing a great job. I say, köszönöm szépen, viszontlátásra.